do it.
I'm trying to
Maybe
find.
there'll be something fun.
Yeah, I'm good. But is there like how the shadows now? It just feels like it's whatever.
What about me? Do I look okay?
Man, you look beautiful,
Do
dude.
I look
Like
like
all the time,
the host
all
of
the
an
time,
aspiring podcast?
all the time. Like, dang, man. That's why I try to dress up today. I gotta go get a
Yeah,
shave so I can look as good as you.
you look
I don't
good.
know, and I still fall
You
short, but
you and
that's
I
okay.
both have that suave like hint of gray, and guys in their middle age. We look almost the same age, which is good for you. Maybe I look
Yeah,
old.
maybe you could share with the audience what product you use to gray your hair
Yeah.
because it can't be. I mean, you're like,
All the time people are like, "Oh, that's not natural, is it?" And I said, "It's God given, man.
oh my gosh.
It's that
Well,
silver fox
that
look." But
I
I
was
don't.
told like people pay for that, and I was like, all right, well, just add a little bit of stress in kids, and you should be good.
Yeah, I don't have it in the beard though. Yours is all in the beard.
It is, but you know what? If you go back like 5 years ago, it was like all like dark
Really?
and then white, and I'm like, that's kind of weird looking,
Instant.
So anyway, all good.
Oh,
All good. So, I don't know if you see it, but I'm wearing a green kurta today.
I like it.
It is, yeah, I wore it because just to celebrate the G20 in India, right? I got coming out of it this
Come on,
weekend,
come on.
and
Yeah.
so just wanted to celebrate that. That was, I think, a big event. Everything was shut down.
Hmm.
So if you were just a normal person,
Yeah.
it was great. There was no traffic on the streets.
That's, was Biden in India?
Yes, he was. President Biden was here, and he met members of the American community at the embassy.
It's great. He didn't know he was there, but he was there. So
This is possibly true. I think he thought he was going home. He ended up in Vietnam.
oh, okay, that's true.
Yeah, but it was
Good to hear
quick though. Like he was here and then gone.
that. Okay.
So no, but that was exciting. It's really a big deal
Yeah.
for India to host the G20. I think it
Yeah.
just represents that India has made huge progress and is a player on the big stage. And
Yeah.
not that they haven't been, but to be, I think, recognized and to be able to host it was a big event. So
That's
anyway, that's why I got my first on,
I love
to
it.
celebrate that. Yeah,
So
man.
good.
So anyway, and it was my wife. I actually joke around. I say the reason President Biden came was because it was my wife's birthday. So
He
um,
was honoring
yeah,
that.
yeah,
How was how was the
it was
dinner?
very
Did it go
sweet of him.
well?
It went well.
Good.
I will add just a few more minutes here, but I will add. So we have this thing. We go to dinner and a movie,
Uh-huh.
and we saw one of our favorite series of movies, The Equalizer,
Oh, okay.
right, with Denzel Washington. So we
Yeah.
like my wife and I love that, and we're so he did. He's getting a little bit older.
Uh-huh.
Denzel's like 68 or something right
Uh-huh.
now, but he still is taking people out like it's like
Still killing it.
amazing. And yes, them. Yes, it and them.
I
Right.
heard sequels are never as good, but I heard 3 was amazing. So,
It was set in a beautiful little town in Italy, and I'm thinking that's where I want to retire.
there you
Yes,
go.
thank you,
Yeah,
Denzel, for bringing that to our attention.
love it.
Yeah, so he did a good job, and then and that was a really entertaining movie. So yeah,
That's good.
yeah, good.
How are
So,
we gonna
buddy,
how are we gonna jump
yeah,
into
you tell
this?
me. You tell me. So we left off last week
Mhm.
with kind of like how we got here, how you and I got here, and just an introduction into cryptocurrency, but more of why we thought it was something that we needed to get into and something that we needed to educate ourselves on,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Which I think was a really good launching point.
Yeah.
And today, um, we just thought that maybe we need to take a small step back before we
Yeah.
leap forward and answer some of those questions that we probably all know, but let's make sure that we're on the same page.
Yeah.
And the most important of that, when we're talking about cryptocurrency and what's going on in this new world of ours, why don't we take a step back and talk about what is money,
Basics.
right? And I think that's just the basics. And everybody's
Yeah.
like, that's such a dumb thing to start
You
with,
guys are
but
idiots.
you
Stupid.
guys are idiots. And you know, maybe, uh, maybe we are. There's a lot of people probably who would agree with that. Um, but I want to make sure. I think we want to make sure that we're bringing everybody along. So maybe
Yeah.
there's somebody in the room who's like, I don't really know how to define that.
Right.
So maybe that's a good starting point for
Yeah.
us today. What do you think?
I think it's great. Yeah.
Great, good.
I, I think just highlighting like what is money and what is it used for is really important. I think especially in these days, if like so, Lenny, you and I come from America, which has a very stable world reserve currency.
Hmm.
Like it's the best money that you can get. Everybody wishes that they could use US dollars. In fact, other countries are pegged to the US dollar. All of those, everybody wishes that they could be a part of that. And so when we look at it as Americans, oh, it's just whatever, that's our currency. But if you're in a different country like a Lebanon, like in Argentina, that is facing just crazy amounts of inflation, and you wish you could get into something like a US dollar, uh, it's really important for all of us to be on the same page with what is money. And so you and I were talking, and really money comes down to two things. I think it needs to be a medium of exchange,
Hmm.
some way that you and I can conduct business, and it needs to be a store of value, something that we can save in. And so I think it does come down to those two things. Something that we can conduct business in, it's a medium of exchange, and then it's a store of value also.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I agree with that. Now, you talked about like, being in the US, we have confidence in the value, whereas there are, countries like Venezuela that we've,
Hmm.
in the last 5 years, have been, I think, at the forefront. However, I was looking back and I saw like Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
and in like the early 2000s, like, I mean, they have some history behind it,
Yeah.
but they were dealing with hyperinflation and they were putting out $100 trillion notes. I mean, a single note, right? Because of this, the value of the money, right,
Yeah.
of the currency was just like, it was worth nothing,
It's wild.
right, due to hyperinflation. So, yeah, I think that understanding just this vehicle, right, of
Hmm.
money and what it can be used for, but I also how it can be impacted, either how it could have a positive impact, but it could have a very serious negative impact to what happens to countries, to people, in terms of being able to use it and the value behind it. So yeah,
Yeah.
that was really interesting to kind of look back into.
Oh, for sure. And I think really you have to look at like our idea of money is probably really just it's a paper form of exchange, and going back to, well, is it backed by anything? And that would bring us all the way back to, if you look at, I think it's 1933 in the US,
That's right.
FDR, they're trying to tackle the Great Depression. They're trying to do all of these, like, how can we really fix the country? It's in this death spiral. And so he's like, hey, I need everybody's gold. In fact, it's illegal to own gold now. Could you imagine if the president did that now? But that's what he did. He's like, hey, we're going to buy gold, and we're going to buy it from you for $20 an ounce. And so they like buy everybody's gold. Now, like, it's illegal to own. I'm sure like grandparents are like, screw that guy. That's my gold, and dig it in the backyard and hide it.
Backyard.
That's what I would do. But
Right.
they get hundreds of of dollars worth of gold, and the next year it goes from $20 an ounce, and they're like, actually, it's $35 an ounce.
Mm.
So really, I would say that like money itself, uh, as it's being controlled by governments, uh, is probably the main problem because the government can do whatever it wants, right? And so uh, FDR from one year to the next increases what people are paying in fiat for that gold, and we can talk about that concept of fiat. I know you were looking at that as well, and you both of you and I for this podcast were researching a little bit. Tell me what fiat is. Do you have a concept of that?
So, with respect to currency, right, it is that in terms of and money, it is that it is backed by and made legal by the government with no gold or any commodity that backs the value of that currency,
Yeah.
right? So, for example, the minute the US government said, we're no longer going to back the currency with gold, and it became legal tender
Hmm.
with no backing,
Right.
right? This is where the concept of fiat comes in,
Yes.
fiat currency, right?
Yes.
So,
Totally. I saw it. I think it's supposedly Latin for "let it be so." Like the government's just saying, "Hey, it's good enough."
let it be so.
Right? Hey, yeah,
This
sure.
is what it is.
So like FDR takes everybody's gold, buys it in 1933, and then in 1971, countries were still like uh, going to the US government and saying, "Hey, we want gold and we'll give you this money for it and we'll take that back." And Nixon finally is like, "No, we're not doing that anymore." And now it's all fiat. It's just, "Hey, let it be so. This is
Right.
going to be what it is." And if you look, you and I were looking at this chart that really shows like inflation from like 1800 and the buying power of a dollar from 1800 all the way to present. And it's pretty standard. Like the inflation is not anything crazy at all until about 1971, right? And then
Right.
it's just like this S curve that's like, and why
Right.
is that? Why is that? Because the government can do whatever it wants. And it's like, actually,
Right.
we're going to print a lot of money and we're just going to do it whenever we decide. And I think what, just from my perspective, in the last 3 years, and you look at, uh, like everybody can research this. You can look at how much money has been printed and put into circulation, and since like even COVID, Trump decided, hey, we're going to print a lot of money and we're going to send it
Hmm.
out, and then Biden did even more, and it's just to where like the U.S. debt right now, we're at like sitting at $30 trillion, and it just keeps going because they can just at any time say, hey, we're going to print more, we're going to print more.
Which really, you know what, if you think about it, it follows a very simple uh, economics principle of supply and demand,
Yes, for sure.
right? And so, if we think about it in the last 2 years or 3 years, we've printed so much that we've devalued the
Yes.
dollar,
Yeah.
right? So our currency is devalued because now there's a ton of it in the marketplace,
Yeah.
right? And then when that is now, if we take a look back and we say, when we talk about what FDR did and what Nixon did in 1971,
Hmm.
before it was there's a limited amount of gold,
Right.
right? That's backing it. So
Yeah.
therefore, there's a great amount of stability that in terms of maintaining value,
Yeah.
right? Because it's all back to a limited amount, right? Or
Yeah.
quantity of gold that backs the currency.
Right.
Once you remove that and you say, you know what, there's nothing that holds this in place, and I can just keep printing because there's really nothing that it's tied to.
Yeah.
That's where we see the all of these type of issues occur. The
Yes.
interesting thing is that it's not only the US, right?
Yes.
It's most of the countries in the world, right,
Hmm.
are operating in the same way. So
Yes.
therefore, like we're in India, sure, fiat currency,
Hmm.
right, is how all countries are operating this way.
Yeah.
The problem that happened in Zimbabwe,
Yeah.
guess what? They started printing a ton of money,
Yes.
right? That's how you
Yes.
end up with $100 trillion notes,
It's worse
right?
than monopoly money, literally. So,
Exactly.
uh, two examples, and like I sit and I remember was one of the reasons like I was really interested in Bitcoin back in 2019, 2020, because they started printing money. And it's like, how can you just say, actually, here's extra $1 trillion, and we're just going to send it out like out of thin air. Literally, it's like if we're. I always thought like when I was a kid, man, like if I got like $100 bill and I put it in a copier and I copied it, and then I could like spend it, and in my like 6-year-old brain, it's like brilliant. Let's do that. And the other people
Right.
are like, oh, it's you can't do that, and you obviously can't. But it's what the government is doing. They're just like printing, and it's not even like physically printing anymore, because how often are we using physical cash? Very, very little. But they're putting extra zeros in the central bank and just being like, yeah, here it is, and we can do whatever with it. But all that to say, it's a really bad system. But as Americans, we have the best bad system you can have. Everybody else, because they're reliant on US dollars, uh, have an even worse system. And so the other night, I had a friend over who I just made friends with him probably a couple of weeks ago. His name's Syed, and Syed is from Egypt, and he's here in the UAE, and he's working. And he told me his story a little bit. And he said, hey, everybody is trying to get out of Egypt because Egypt, they run on the Egyptian pound. And he said in the last like year, it has gone from 15, I think he said 15 Egyptian pounds per dollar to 30. And it's just on that beginning of the S curve. Because, and I looked it up in preparation, and in 2015, the Egyptian pound was at 7 Egyptian pounds to a dollar. And then in 2018, it was at 17. So it increased 300%. And then 2020, it leveled off a bit to 15. And then in 2023, as of today, it's at 30. And then same thing, they're just starting to print, and they're trying to figure out what to do. And whenever a government goes to printing money, that's the beginning of the downfall. And I was looking at a similar thing. I think it was on The Economist, and it popped up on my YouTube, and so I watched it a little bit today. And similar thing, in 2015, the Argentinian peso was 5 pesos to a dollar, and then in 2018, it went to 20. In 2020, it went to 60. Today in 2023, it's at 350 pesos to a dollar. And they interviewed this lady that was working in a shop, and she's just running a local shop there for groceries, et cetera, et cetera. And she said, in the morning, I'll set out whatever cost is, and I'll mark the bread, I'll mark the milk, I'll mark everything. And then it might change in the afternoon. So I have to go back and remark. And she's just showing like stacks of dollars. And she's like, this won't fit in the till. And it's for very little groceries. And I don't know what to do. And I mean, think about it. If your money loses 99% of its value in like 8 years, let alone like 300% of its value in the last just a couple of years, it goes down 300%. Like, it is a medium of exchange, but how would you save anything? I don't know what you do. What do you do?
Yeah.
How do you build anything for anyone? Like, there's
Yeah.
no
No,
future in that.
and I do want to step in and say,
Yeah.
um, I, I believe that the idea could be effective or managed, but it requires for um, people and for the government to be much more um, critical in how they approach moving forward, right? Like how they print and how they, because there are systems that are in place, like, that they say, a little bit of inflation is good,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
so there are things that I think that, if effectively managed,
Right.
it could possibly be good.
Right.
However, that's requiring that it's like walking the tightrope, right?
Yeah.
We just want to make sure that we're walking that tightrope.
Yeah.
And most people, eventually, you're going to fall off,
Oh my gosh.
right?
Yes. Especially in
And
politics. Think about like, do you
right.
trust the government with anything? No. I mean, I don't, with
Eh,
very, very little.
uh, yeah, I can't name one that I would say they do such a great job with managing money, right? Like
It's like
I can't.
it's like every time I pay taxes, I think I'm literally giving a drunk guy just this percentage of my finances, and I'm just gonna
Right,
go. If anybody like ran a business like we run the U.S. government, that's $30 trillion in debt. If you had a business that
right.
was a fraction of that in debt, well, you're the business wizard. I mean, I
I
come to
would
you and I'm like,
fire them.
I'm $1 million in debt in my business, and I don't
Right,
really have a plan. In fact, in 5 years, I'm going to be probably $10 million in debt. What should I do?
right. Yeah,
What
you know
What
what?
would you do?
Yeah, you know what? I think I would fire anybody who was in my company who thought that way, first of all, right?
Yeah.
Because but well, here's the thing. Most of the people who are making these decisions realize it's not their money, but if they looked at it as if it was their own personal money, they would probably manage it differently,
Hmm. Yeah. That's
right?
good.
And that's not what they're doing today, right?
Right.
And I think we just have to recognize that everybody's looking and seeing the problems and not exactly sure how are we going to navigate through this.
Hmm.
Right. And therefore, that's kind of like what our discussions have been. What does it look like? What's the next step? How do we navigate through this? Because we understand that we might not trust the central government because they're the ones
Mhm.
who handle the printing of all the money and they're kind of managing, right? Or trying to navigate us through this, if not driving us off a cliff at times.
Yeah.
We're dealing with inflation, I would say, in almost every single country. There's very few that are not, and some of them they're dealing with hyperinflation.
Yes.
Those those didn't just appear out of nowhere. Those are policies and practices and decisions that were made that led us to this point. And
Right.
um, I think at some point we're thinking about how do we bring that back into our control, right?
Mm.
We understand this decision was made, if 1971, if we want to look at it from the U.S. economy, right? So
Right.
that's, let's see, I'm not very good in math, right? But that's still like over 50 years ago,
Mhm.
right? That happened 52
Yeah.
years ago,
Right.
right? So, and we're saying, how do we get control of this? How do we put it back in our hands? And it's not necessarily completely controlled by the government. And the value of money, like you said, right? You're paying your taxes. Well, I'm not going to
Right.
take one third of my money and give it to my 13-year-old because I know they have a really bad track record, right?
Yeah.
If any, of being
Right.
successful. So why wouldn't I consider what are some of the alternatives,
Yeah.
right? If I don't have any other option, if I have to put it somewhere, I need to figure out where to put it where I might have greater control over it.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, part of the argument, right? And the debate and the conversation
Mhm.
around cryptocurrency,
Oh,
around
for sure.
Bitcoin,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that's where we're, all of our conversations are when we say, what is money? And then,
Yeah.
and what are some of the challenges of it?
Right.
The alternative becomes, for example, Bitcoin,
Yeah.
right? And so maybe you want to touch a little bit on that.
Yeah, I think one of the like we said, what is money? Well, it's a medium of exchange, and then it should be a store of value. And if I can't, like, I remember as a kid, my parents would be like, "Oh, you should save 10% of what you get, or even more if you could." And so, like, I'd have like a little stash in my drawer of dollars and whatnot. So let's say since 1971, if I had that stash, or it's like my savings account, and I kept throwing, let's say, for fun, for round numbers, you said it was 52 years ago. So if I'm saving, let's say I just am saving $1,000 a year, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. Well, if I've saved $52,000, uh, $52,000 in 1971 loses, I believe I looked at a stat that said it's lost 87% of its buying power since then. So I've saved roughly like 13% of what it could have been. So if I had $52,000, then basically it would have been like I had saved just a fraction of that. And so if I want to save money, I need to put it into something that will hold its value. So we have things like gold. Gold for century and millennia has been used as a store of value. Currently, we have things like property. And if you own a property, let's say in 2019, and that's doubled in value, you're doing really well. Has the property actually doubled in value? Has it become more valuable? No, it hasn't become more valuable. It's just the amount of money that you need to buy it, it has really lost twice its value. Uh, you need to put money in stocks or anything like that, and so the S&P has gone crazy in the last couple of years, and it's gone up like 30%, et cetera, et cetera. All of that to say, you need to put your money in something, because as we have said throughout this conversation, if you're just holding cash and putting it in your standard savings account, you're just losing
Mhm.
87, 90, 99% of its value. And so, really, finding that medium of store of value is the biggest deal. And since this is Hard Knocks Crypto, obviously, we're going to talk about that. And I think as we're going to dive into Bitcoin in the following weeks, Bitcoin is really, it's been compared to, let's say, a gold 2.0. You need to find something that cannot be just printed at will, like your fiat currency. And so Bitcoin was invented by Satoshi Nakamoto back in 2009. It started as him saying, hey, we have a fixed supply of this, which is a huge deal. Two things: it's not controlled by anyone, so it's decentralized. It's not run by the Bitcoin company or anything. It's just software. It's decentralized software that's programmed to say, hey, there's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever be uh, put out. Currently, there's roughly 19 million in circulation. And very similar to what you were talking about in supply and demand is, hey, whatever the market value is what people are going to be able, or whatever the market value is, people will say, hey, I'm going to pay for that. So today I think it's 26,000 or something per Bitcoin. And if you get one of those, then you have one of the 21 million. Or if you get a fraction of that, then you have one of the 21 million. But the beauty is that it's a store of value that can be used anywhere in the world. I have some Thai baht in my drawer because I went to Thailand a couple months ago. And if I try to go to the store here in the UAE and I give them some Thai baht, they'll look at me and say, nope. In fact, I did that when I was trying to get some chai the other day because I had one of the Thai coins and I thought it was a UAE dirham, and I gave it to him. And he's like, nope, nope. So I give back, right? But
Right.
if I had Bitcoin, that's something that we can all use. Now stores aren't accepting it, but it's this system that's worldwide. It's not controlled by the Thai government. It's not controlled by the UAE government or the US government. China is, if you look at the history of Bitcoin in China, they've like literally declared it illegal, and then they've declared it legal and declared it illegal and legal for multiple times throughout the years. But they can't shut it down. They can just say, hey, we don't accept this or we don't allow it in our country. It's used everywhere. And so that's one of the beauties of Bitcoin. It's decentralized, it has a fixed supply. And according to supply and demand, it's just simple mathematics that it's probably going, if it's recognized between you and me as, hey, this is worth something, if it's recognized by institutions, if it's recognized throughout the world, then if it has a fixed supply, as the USD is being printed, as the China yuan is being printed, all these government fiats are being printed from supply and demand, it looks like Bitcoin will keep going up in value versus all of these fiat currencies because of simply supply and demand. So that's a
So,
quick soliloquy.
yeah, no, no, I love it. Thank you. And I do want to add to this,
Yeah.
right? That we have to. Part of the challenge with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, we say, it's virtual. I don't really understand it. It's not in my hand. I can't touch it.
Yeah.
right? What I can touch or hold in my hand, I trust more than, obviously in today's world. However, in the previous episode, I think I touched on how 25 years ago we were all like on AOL chat, and today
Hmm.
here we are, we're talking about AI.
Yep.
And 25 years from now, we can foresee that the way technology is going, we're going to take another leap.
Yes.
And part of that equation, as we are seeing governments talking about it, we're seeing investment firms talking about it, that people are starting to kind of push their chips into the middle, saying,
Yep.
"Hey, I'm in
Yep.
on cryptocurrency." And if that's the case, then what we then can, as we think through this a little bit, that if there is a fixed supply for something that more and more large institutions,
Hmm.
governments, investment firms, just people in general are starting to buy into,
Hmm.
then what we do know is that the demand is going to go up for it,
It's
right?
just basic
So the demand
economics.
is this is basic economics. The
Yes.
demand is going to go up. There's a limited supply, and so
Uh-huh.
therefore there is greater value attached to it,
Yeah.
right? So this is simple like economics 101,
Yes.
right? So therefore, again, and we're starting to see that in markets, we're starting to see that you can have, this transactional value. It's not just stored value anymore. There's
Yes.
transactional value also,
Hmm.
right? And so therefore, that also adds to it. Therefore, being logical in the conversation,
Hmm.
this is something that's important, right?
Yes.
And we're not addressing, I think, the why, and that because we tried to do that in the previous episode. But today, to talk about what is money and that cryptocurrency is now being considered across the world as a alternative.
Yes.
Like I don't even know if it's a question anymore. I think people are those who are in the game understand that this is an alternative, and 25 years from now, who knows? Maybe that is the primary, right? And
I
we've started to
mean,
transition off of right these
think,
fiat currencies.
think about a few things. I was talking with my kids the other day, and I was talking about how before iPhones and smartphones, what I used, and I said I got my first iPhone back in 2011. It was iPhone 4S, and I was so jacked because my sister had an iPhone 4, and it was amazing because you could get Google Maps on it, and you could like have your whole iPod on it, et cetera, et cetera. And that was 12 years ago. And I was thinking about even this morning how I remember probably 15 years ago, I went to Walmart during Thanksgiving weekend, and I bought a router for my parents' house because they didn't have Wi Fi. And I was gonna, me and my brother and a few others were going to play this computer game with our laptops, and we had to have Wi-Fi. And so I bought a router for the weekend. We used it, and then I returned it because of Walmart's return policy. And so, but think about this, Letty.
That's
15
great.
years ago, my parents didn't have Wi-Fi. Why would they use
Yeah,
Wi-Fi? They didn't have a smartphone. They didn't. There was no iPads. That's 15 years ago.
yeah,
And I mean, think about the acceleration of all of this stuff. You say 25 years. Think about 5 years from now. And
right,
if it's basic economics, if you have a fixed supply of something that's recognized by everyone, which Bitcoin even 5 years ago, 3 years ago, people are like, but now man, it's legit. And so think about 3 years from now, 5 years from now, like where we'll be. And if it's a land grab, basically, there's 21 million of these things.
right.
And do you know how many millionaires there are in the world? Do you have a guess?
No idea.
55
I know
million.
I'm well. Okay,
55 million millionaires. And if there's 21 million Bitcoin, not every millionaire can have a Bitcoin. So
right.
think about like if you had a Bitcoin, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And the same thought process. If you can study and look at the price of Bitcoin through the years, so at the halving, and we'll talk about halvings and that kind of thing. At the halving 4 years ago, the price was roughly like six, seven, $8,000 a Bitcoin, and
Hmm.
then uh, the output of them halved, and then about a year later, it shoots up and starts to escalate to the crazy amounts it got to, and then it fell off to what it is today, roughly 26,000. And so if you could have bought Bitcoin at six, seven, $8,000 a coin, you would have doubled, tripled, quadrupled your money. That'd probably be
Can I
good.
tell you? I do remember when it was like 5,000. I'm thinking to
Hmm.
myself, I should buy some, but I'm like 5,000 for something I don't know anything about.
Yeah,
Now, obviously, sitting here today, I would say, man, I wish I had bought.
sure.
Right? Like even if I had dropped like at that time 25,000 into that, I would have sitting with five right now.
But
I'd be
what
happy with a
exactly? And
day,
I've
but
thought about that too.
yeah,
Is like, oh, if you woulda, coulda, shoulda. But it's kind of that same
never
concept
works out.
of if I could have bought something. That's like my father-in-law always says. He's a farmer. He has land in Montana, and he says they're not making any more land, so buy some land. And
What?
because they can't print it, right? They can't. There's just a
Right.
fixed amount of land, and in the same
That's
way,
it.
they're not printing more digital currency of Bitcoin. It's what it is, and if it's recognized by everybody and it can be used, it's probably good to grab some of that is in fixed supply, and it
If
would have,
possible.
if possible,
Right.
and
Right.
the best time to always do that, buy something fixed, is yesterday. But if you can't do it
Yeah.
yesterday, you should do it today.
Well, and then so having said that, right, we know that there's a fixed amount, and what hopefully over the course of the next shows that we're going to be doing is helping our viewers or listeners to walk through that process where they're able to make the purchase, right? Make an investment
Yeah,
and learn as much as they can about it. So
yeah,
that's hopefully what the journey is about,
yeah.
and that we're walking with each other. I'm going to learn a lot. So
Me too.
um, just I the first couple episodes and even next week we're just going to be doing laying the foundation
Hmm.
for a lot of the heavy lifting that's going to come. We want to just make sure that everybody understands the terms that we're using, the kind of little bit of the history behind it, maybe what the future might look like. Because when we start getting into the more nitty gritty stuff of how to do this, it'll all make sense. And then when they're, at their cocktail parties or wherever they're going to be,
Oof,
and people
awesome.
start talking about cryptocurrency, they're going to step in and be like, you know what? I know some stuff about this,
Boom.
right? And then all of a sudden, you'll be the coolest person in the room.
So cool.
I'm not. It's Andrew right now. I'm trying to get there.
No, I think the more you're around this stuff and you can simply answer things like what is blockchain, what is wallet, what is an
Yeah,
altcoin. We talked about having. What does that mean? Just really
I need to go on my list,
simply.
man.
And so I think
Right.
next week we're going to talk about some of those things that literally will take like maybe 90 seconds on each one. It's like, what's the simplest way you can say,
Yes.
hey, like today, hopefully you learned fiat currency.
Right.
It's like Latin for let it be, which means the government can say whatever and it's there. Boom.
There you go.
Now you know what
Yeah,
fiat
it
currency
exists.
is.
Perfect.
It's
Share it
going to
with
be
your
fun.
friends and family.
Yes.
Anyway, Andrew, this was fun, man. I
It's fun.
appreciate
It's
you, man.
always fun hanging out with you, especially when we can have our equipment work right and we can do all the things.
No internet outage this week.
Pretty good.
I paid my bill. Paid my bill.
Nice job. Nice job.
All right, man. See you next
All
week
right.
then.
All right. All right. Sounds
Bye,
good.
everyone.
Bye. Bye.